Very good morning, very good afternoon, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for dialing in, tuning in, joining the Performance at Work from Performance Management to Performance Enablement Forum. I think my name is Mihai Nagy. I'm the partner and head of content here at the Agile Congress. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank to our event sponsor, Better Works. If you'd like to find out more about Better Works, please do visit betterworks.com. Better Works is a better way, the proven solution for agile professionals rely on for increasing employee engagement, manager efficiency, and business impact. At the end of the session, you will have a couple of minutes to learn more about Better Works products. How to interact today? Of course, it's very important to make this forum interactive, so do participate in chat, join the Q&A. If you have any questions along the way, just please put it up in the Q&A or even here in the chat box. We shall be monitoring the chat box continuously. And of course, use this opportunity to network and build bridges. We have over 800 people signed up for this session. As I see the numbers, we have close to 200 already joined in today. So it's a great opportunity to build your professional network across the whole world. And I'd like to take this opportunity to draw attention to the agilecongress.com website, which is, hopefully will be your go-to place for content and ideas, inspiring new information from around the world of work. We put up at least 5 to 10 new articles every single week. So you find some really amazing articles, videos, masterclasses. Do visit agile-congress.com. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our speakers today. We have an amazing panel of subject matter experts who spared no effort in preparing and bringing you the latest content, some inspiring thinking around how to reimagine performance management in this new world of work. Andrea Lagan is the Chief Operating Officer at BetterWorks. Isabel de Wolf is the Director of Talent and Organization Development at Barco. Alan Colquitt. Alan is the author of Next Generation Performance Management, The Triumph of Science Over Myth and Superstition. And last but not least, the chairwoman for the next 90 minutes, Amy Culverhouse. Amy is in charge of enterprise sales at EMEA here at BetterWorks. The agenda today will be pretty action-packed. So I hope you will be taking this opportunity to participate and share your questions and challenge the speakers if you don't agree with some of the ideas shared with you. We start with a keynote by Alan Colquitt, followed by a session by Andrea, and then we join the panel discussion around reimagining performance management in this new world of work. And last but not least, you have an opportunity to experience BetterWorks product and how it can help you to drive employee engagement, to drive goal settings and achieving those goals across the organization. So now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Amy Culverhouse on our virtual stage. Amy, if you are here, please do turn your camera on and join me here. Thank you so much. The virtual stage is now all yours.
Thank you, Mihai. I saw a couple comments in the chat that a couple people were unable to hear audio. Just if anyone that can hear audio can ping it in the chat just to confirm that it's not on our end, that would be really helpful. I'm guessing, given the activity in the chat, that other people can hear. Okay, great. Thank you, Alan, for confirming. So hopefully those of you who were unable to hear anything earlier on are now all sorted. We hope you can join us. So thanks again to the HR Congress for inviting us today. This is I think our third time now partnering together. So some of you may know me already from previous conversations. My name is Amy Culverhouse, and I'm an account executive from the BetterWorks team and based in London. BetterWorks is really excited to be hosting this event today on the subject of from performance management to performance enablement. We have some really interesting and engaging conversations, as Mihai said, over the course of the next 90 minutes. To set the scene, the last couple of years has seen a significant shift in the way organizations need to manage performance. Organizations are rethinking how we foster performance and leverage continuous performance enablement to drive engagement, retention, and culture on an ongoing basis. And as I think we all know, the annual performance review does not help us to achieve these things. The market dynamics, competition, and agile business conditions are really pushing us to constantly reinvent and innovate to ensure business continuity. So why are we leaving performance management practices stuck in the past when the rest of the business is evolving? It's really time to evolve them to be more continuous, which will result in increased eNPS, identifying and retaining top talent, and attracting fresh new talent in a competitive marketplace. So in today's session, you'll hear from a variety of speakers. So it's time for me to introduce you to them. Firstly, you'll hear from Alan Colquitt, independent consultant and advisor, affiliate research scientist at the Center for Effective Organizations at USC, and he'll be discussing debunking the myth of performance management, the triumph of science over myth and superstition. Secondly, we'll hear from our very own Andrea Lagan, BetterWorks Chief Operating Officer. Andrea will share 6 keys to better performance enablement. And thirdly, we'll have one of HR Congress's very popular panel discussions on the subject of reimagining performance management, goals and results in the hybrid workplace. So we'll welcome back Alan, Andrea, and then we'll introduce you to Isabel DeWolf, Director of Talent and Organizational Development at Barco. And finally, as if that wasn't enough, we welcome back Bruce Woolcroft, again for a 3rd time to HR Congress. Bruce is Senior Solutions Engineer at BetterWorks, and he'll provide you with a 5-minute demo of the BetterWorks platform, and it's very much waiting around for, as it will bring to life many of the concepts that we've been discussing today and show you how investing in the right tool will really enable the culture of continuous feedback and high performance. So if you'd like to learn more about BetterWorks after the session today, feel free to get in touch with me directly through LinkedIn, through email, or through our website. I'll finish my slot with a bit of admin. So I'd like to stress that we would love your questions, and it's great to see all the interactivity in the chat already. Please do enter those questions and I'll monitor it. We love an interactive audience. And please also download the materials listed under the handouts tab on the right-hand side, including our recently launched 2022 Global HR Report, which is definitely worth a download. We surveyed organizations across the globe, both in Europe and the US, and compiled an insightful report. So we'd love for you to download that. So let's get this show on the road. So please welcome Alan Colquitt on the subject of debunking the myth of performance management, the triumph of science over myth and superstition. Welcome, Alan. Let me turn my camera off and let you on.
Thanks. Thanks, Amy. Let me pull my slides up. Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. It's great to be back. Thanks to everybody for who's responsible for me being here, the Mihai and the Catalan, the HR Congress folks and the BetterWorks folks as well, Amy, Doug, Andrea, Stacy. Appreciate the chance to come back. So as Amy said, the performance management is very much stuck in the past. The image here is intentional, that we are living in the dark ages in many ways. In performance management, we act as if the world is flat. We behave every day as if the world is flat, and we are continue to kind of ignore the evidence that suggests that it's not, in fact, flat. And part of the central mythology, I think, of performance management is very much the nature of how you motivate and control performance in organizations, how you motivate and control employees in organizations, that it's not the flat earth metaphor is really very much a coercive kind of control model. So we behave very much as if this is true, and we ignore the evidence, and we don't challenge our assumptions and beliefs. So we'll talk a bit about the nature of kind of how that happened, what we should do differently, how we should think about performance management differently, what are better models and frameworks and practices. So let's go forward. And to be clear, we've been at this for a long time. And I think the idea of a wicked problem, if many of you are familiar with that term, I think the idea of performance management as a wicked problem fits. You can see the definition. Everyone does it the same way. Everyone is unhappy. All the stakeholders are unhappy. And despite 70 years or more of study and tinkering, and extremely high costs and investment in the U.S. upwards, and the best estimates I can find are upwards of almost $350 billion, billion with a B, spent every year in merit, and bonuses are distributed based on this process. And by my guess, we get maybe nothing from that spend, and we may actually hurt ourselves for spending that amount of money. So lots and lots of study and tinkering and very little improvement. And very strong forces holding this in place. Those of you who've tried to change it know exactly what I mean. That there are very formidable dynamics that are keeping the status quo in place. And so it's the point of this is it's going to be very difficult to change. So for excuse me, for those of you who are kind of looking for low-hanging fruit here, there isn't any. This is going to be hard to actually transform. So we have to kind of be prepared for this kind of change. Okay, so let's kind of start at the beginning, which is where most of the problems are with performance management. What is performance management for? And despite what we say, despite what academics say, despite what companies say, and many of them say that, well, it does many things for a company, to help create direction and develop employees, make decisions about them, provide information, and so on. The real answer is it's really about one thing. It's about pay distribution and pay differentiation and reward distribution. This was the number one purpose in the research that Edie Goldberg and I did a couple of years ago to prepare for a chapter that we wrote on performance management. Others, Willis Towers Watson's benchmarking work, World at Work's benchmarking work, all show that the primary purpose of performance management in organizations is reward distribution. The experts agree. I could have kind of put 5 or 10 quotes from important papers that people have written that all suggest, like this quote from a call for papers for a special journal focused exclusively on performance management that would provide kind of the newest and latest thinking. Even they, in fact, in their preparation for potential authors, suggested that we all know that performance management is in the business of evaluating and compensating employees. And it was very clear to me that they were not interested in entertaining any ideas that were contrary to that. So the problem with this is it constrains our thinking in terms of how you solve it. And so part of the question is, well, how did this happen? How did this, why is this the case, and how did this become the case? So a little history lesson. And we, obviously we don't have time to go into depth here, but where did the rise in pay for performance, kind of the marriage between performance management and rewards, come from? Where did that happen? How did that happen? And the reality is the science has always been there. The theories that are behind all of these pay practices and performance management practices have always been there, from classical kind of stimulus response psychology and classical economics and the early scientific management and political philosophy around, are people basically bad or good? Most of the sense is they're mostly bad. They're mostly lazy. That we need incentives and threats and carrots and sticks to motivate them and align their interests with those of the company. And that behaviors, is a function of its consequences. So the job for performance management and rewards is to apply consequences. So that was part of it. It's always been there. But some other developments in the 80s, certainly in the U.S., but I would be very keen if others had insights into how these things happened in Europe. But many, in the 80s, there was a concerted effort begun to limit executive pay. And lots of these efforts through disclosure rules for proxy statements, disclosing the roles for the top 5 executives, and also tax law changes in the US in the early 90s that limited the deductibility of executive pay unless it was tied to performance. All of these things caused, in true fashion, attempts were to limit executive pay, but they had exactly the opposite effect. Pay for executives skyrocketed. The use of incentives for executives skyrocketed. So after these, efforts, we ended up with much higher salaries and much higher use of incentive pay, mostly early on through stock options. So tying executive pay to the performance of the company in terms of stock price. So incentives, the use of incentives skyrocketed and penetrated deep into the organization. Moving from maybe up to 3% of people's pay being based on variable pay to upwards of 13 to 15% now, and moving from executive use of variable pay to almost everyone is subject to some kind of individual variable pay program now, certainly upwards of 90%. So it's important to understand and keep in mind how flawed a picture this is. I'll come back to that in a minute, but these theories on the left were based on a very different times, very different kind of industrial, even agricultural era organizations. And it's important to understand that the developments on the right, that incentive and variable pay and pay for performance didn't expand dramatically because it was effective. It expanded because if it was good for executives, it was good for everyone else, and it expanded because of limits, tax laws and regulatory reforms that failed. So this, what we have now is not the result of reasoned, sensible kind of judgments about what works. So it's important to keep that in mind. Okay. And so as a result of these developments, performance management evolved, accordingly to fit this purpose. It's not surprising, not a coincidence, excuse me, that in the 90s, when GE began using forced distributions. So reward budgets became central. We had to manage costs, so we have to keep these budgets from being overspent. We need a forced distribution system and calibration to do that. Lots of focus on ratings. We can't get rid of ratings, and it changed the feel for this process, and it dramatically increased the problems related to this process, related to the perception of unfairness, the perception of inaccuracy in ratings, and the dramatic increase in perceptions of inequality in this process, and the inequality in the judgments that are driving this process. Okay. And so, this is a problem for us. Again, as I think Amy mentioned it at the beginning, the world is different now than it was in the 1930s, the 1920s. Basic from the industrial era kind of assumptions and beliefs that are underpinning the model on the left. Performance management was really designed for that model, for a world that with very specific jobs, very simple jobs, routine jobs that remain kind of the same year to year, and where spans of control are small. We supervise. We can see everybody that reports to us. They're all in the same building, in the same office, and And most of the people, excuse me, that are doing the work are people that we own. And it's a different world now, rapidly becoming a very different world where we're working in a more agile way. We're working more as teams than individuals. Jobs are much more complex now and much more dynamic. All the simple jobs have been outsourced and automated. So with large spans of control, much flatter organizations, and much tighter budgets. So we just don't have a lot of money to throw around for incentives. So the world is very different now, and science has kind of moved on from the model on the left to the model on the right, but very few in the business world. We're still very much living with the image of the world on the left, and so if we're going to make a change, we're going to have to adopt practices and assumptions and beliefs and theories that match the world on the right, if we're going to be effective in really changing things. And then, so the question is, what do we change to if this doesn't work? And so one of the ways, I think one of the ways of looking at this process, we need to kind of step back and reframe what this process is designed for, and ask the question, what purpose does performance management serve for organizations? And use using an organization design lens, and this is just a picture of a fairly popular organization design model from McKinsey, the 7S model. And if we use an organization design lens to look at this, there's a kind of a bucket here that talks about systems and processes. That includes both the horizontal processes, that workflow processes, but also the management and control processes that sit on top of the horizontal work processes. These are mostly management and control processes, decision processes like budgeting and financial controls, business planning, prioritization processes, audit processes, governance. So it's, the question is, how do we get people to pay attention to the right things and not pay attention to the wrong things? And PM is performance management and really rewards programs in general are kind of classic control processes. Control used in a kind of a non-evaluative way. I mean, organizations need control systems in order to function in the organization. And so the question is really, how do we, what mechanisms and how do we, direct attention? How do we motivate? How do we encourage individuals to act in ways that benefit the company? And in the past, we've had a traditional way of kind of answering that question. And in general, what we find, and when you look at the management control literature, there's really a couple of different approaches to control. One is coercive control, which is is organizations' traditional go-to strategy for control. And those of us who've lived in large organizations know the mechanisms of coercive control well: hierarchy, formal processes, written processes and procedures, chain of command, management directives, centralized decisions, very formal roles and responsibilities. And these, so the approach is always kind of restrictive and codified and prescriptive, and classic kind of carrot and stick control systems, performance management systems linked to extrinsic rewards are all classic coercive control strategies. And I think about 90% of the research done on control systems is done on coercive control systems. So, and the sense is from the research in this area that these are not effective. They're based on old thinking, old methodologies, old models, outdated, and we need to change them. And the advantage of a kind of a control systems frame here is we actually have an alternative. As part of the problem with performance management, when you think about the classic kind of performance management through ratings serving pay for performance systems, is that there isn't an alternative. It's difficult to conceive of an alternative to that, framing performance management in terms of rewards. How else would you do it? And so I think the advantage of a control system kind of view here is that you have an alternative that they call, the researchers call, enabling control. And so the advantage here is this is a much lighter touch to control, much more reliant on more psychological and sociological kinds of mechanisms. These are things that are making a strong comeback in organizations. Focus on purpose and meaning, belonging, relatedness, autonomy, mastery, and competence. So using those kind of deeper, more durable needs to help individual, to help direct and control how individuals behave in organizations. And also kind of classic things like creating the right kind of culture and organization design, and creating high context and high transparency, so it's very clear what we're trying to achieve, so people can make their own choices in alignment with what the organization needs. And these approaches have been around since the late 60s, early 70s, much less popular in organizations, and are much more aligned with the future of work. And this is the kind of the mandate in this area of study, is that we have to abandon these control mechanisms and processes on the left because they don't work. They're based on old thinking. They don't match the requirements and demands that we're facing now, which is much more complicated work, much more team-based work, larger spans of control, difficult to supervise everybody, and half the people working for you, working on the things that you're doing, don't report to you, or aren't even owned by the organization anyway. So, this is a much more sensible way to think about control in the future. And one of my favorite quotes, I think, just kind of perfectly captures the essence of enabling control. And in the book I wrote, I actually use this as the kind of the beginning chapter quote, I think, for the goals chapter. But this is very much the traditional way to do this would be to put in place an incentive system or a piece rate system, paying people by the amount of wood and by the progress of kind of building the boat. But this is not what enabling control is about. It's about painting the picture and helping people understand what we're up to, what we're trying to achieve, getting them to internalize those goals, and then turning them loose to get it done. And so we need to do things differently. We need different models, different frameworks. This is a model that Edie Goldberg and I created, again, for this chapter we just wrote. So it kind of starts with, it starts with the name change. And a lot of people, I think, are including Better Works and others, are seeing the value of thinking about this differently, that people's performance doesn't need to be managed from the outside, that it needs to be enabled. So this needs to be about thinking about performance management and performance enablement in terms of, at the front, talking about the basic purpose of kind of providing direction, providing alignment, and providing support in the service of performance. So this brings performance back in instead of having it on the sideline behind rewards. And so this model kind of starts with a foundation of context and direction that goals and line of sight provides, and then focuses heavily on enabling performance rather than controlling it, evaluating it, and incenting it through coaching and feedback and the kind of support that people need to make progress against the goals they've got. And then and development is a critical piece of this. You can't have long-term sustained performance without development, especially in a world where the half-life of skills is a year or 2 years or 3 years. And then the other idea of this idea of the spiral nature of this, that kind of ongoing day-to-day enabling performance kind of helps build people's kind of self-concept, their increases their resources, increasing their confidence and self-efficacy, gives them the capabilities they need to continue to perform, at a high level, kind of day after day, building resources and this upward kind of virtuous spiral that helps people lean in, helps them take on more responsibilities. And it can also add, if not done well, and this is what we see in organizations now, is that it's also a vicious cycle where people, progress gets blocked. They don't get what they need in terms of help and support and feedback, and people begin to kind of, fall into more of a resignation and resentment pattern. They kind of spiral down, lose energy, lose commitment, and performance and motivation suffers. So we need different models, and we need practices like these on the right that much more goal-centric, much more continuous. This has to be done embedded in the flow of work through our meetings, and especially at the team level. Much more focus on positivity and helping people make progress, and much simpler documentation, simpler technology, and then heavy manager support to get this work done. So this we need something very different than what we have now, something very much embedded in the flow of work and not separated in terms of time and specific events, and not connected to pay. And so what you see that's missing here is all the bad stuff that we have to get rid of: ratings, individualistic pay for performance programs, and so on. And then one last slide, just to address kind of the elephant in the room. Well, what do you do with rewards, in all of this? And the answer is, it is difficult to reform performance management without reforming rewards. And so the idea is, we certainly need to disconnect them, but in many ways, disconnecting them is what a lot of organizations do. In time, they separate compensation from performance management in time, but they don't divorce them in terms of purpose. We need to divorce them, not just disconnect them. And really, we need to manage compensation without pay for performance and differentiation. And we need to motivate without money. And part of the way you do that is, it's four things. So it's pay people well. So, and think base and think market there instead of variable pay and incentives. And we need to grow people's pay over time. We need to give people market-based pay increases, give them cost of living increases, and promote them more quickly. Much more narrow banding allows more promotions, grow their pay that way. Pay the person rather than the position. And then also share the wealth, much more focus on organizational incentive programs rather than individualistic kind of incentive programs, profit sharing, gain sharing, stock ownership. And then heavy investment in all the things we know matter to people that are not financially related, like recognition and appreciation, like learning and development. People really want to get better. Let's give them access to all the learning and development opportunities they need. Give them access to special assignments and lateral moves that really grow their skills and develop them. There are lots of things that people want that are not necessarily financially related. So in the end, we have to reform rewards as well as performance management. And again, it's going to take time. It's going to be hard. But if we want to make performance management into a tailwind instead of a headwind, these are the things we're going to have to do. So that's it. If you want more, there's certainly more you can read from me. And if we have some time, we can go back and entertain questions. I'm terrible at multitasking, so it's hard for me to look at the chat and speak at the same time. So if I don't know if Mihai or Amy, if there are questions you think we should entertain.
We had lots of questions. In fact,
sure.
I've done a few of these, and I don't think I've ever seen so many questions. So it's good. I think we've got time maybe for one before we get to Andreas' section. And there was a lot of chat, as you can imagine, about the not differentiating comp. Lots of comments on that, which you can read through.
Yeah.
One of the ones that a few people kind of wanted you to elaborate on was, what is the recommendation around this? Are you suggesting don't differentiate on comp? So you covered some of that in the last slide, but perhaps just chat a bit more on that.
This is maybe the most important point, is that, I mean, the answer is and I've lived in organizations my entire career. I am not, despite what I say, I am not delusional. I do understand what this takes. The answer is we should still differentiate between employees based on base pay. And the key is to differentiate based on things that are legitimate and are perceived by employees as legitimate. People's credentials, the amount of experience, all those things we're going to treat people differently based on base pay, based on the market for their skills that they have and their position. But what we have to get away from is differentiation, and more radical differentiation based on individual factors like performance ratings that are terribly inaccurate, terribly unreliable, terribly unfair. And so the key is to differentiate based on things that are much more legitimate. And so and to reduce the amount of differentiation based on individual performance factors, because we don't measure those very well, and they're much more difficult to justify, and it's much more difficult to defend.
Great, thank you for that. We've got so many more questions, and I've noted them all down in case we have time later, because Alan will be back for our panel discussion. So Alan, have a read through the chat and feel free to engage. I know Bruce and Mihai have been commenting on some of the questions. So thank you so much.
Just one note to I feel free to reach out to me. This is really important to me. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to kind of enter into a conversation about these topics.
Great, thank you. Well, we'll see you in a bit, but we'll move on to Andrea for now. So let me introduce the BetterWorks Chief Operating Officer, Andrea Lagen. She will share 6 keys to better performance enablement. So Andrea, over to you.
Fantastic. I am pulling up the slides here. Hopefully you can see the slides now.
We can, yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Chairwoman Extraordinaire, Amy, for the introduction. And thanks to everyone who's here for joining this session with HR Congress today. I am very excited to talk to you about really successfully navigating the journey to better performance enablement, and how in 6 key steps you can go about redefining performance management, that wicked problem that Alan just described, to better engage your employees, to develop your top talent, to reduce employee churn, and to drive better business results. So there's a lot of blah, blah about me on this slide, but let me just summarize it by saying that I have been around a while. I have had the opportunity to do some pretty amazing things, and it's really all because I've been surrounded by some pretty incredible people, all of whom, regardless of my experience with them, I am grateful for in one way or another. And the reason that I love what I get to do every day is because I get to see how enabling and empowering people through the work that they do and the technology that they use every day truly makes a difference in the world. And for those of you who may not be familiar with BetterWorks, we've been around for about 9 years. We were founded in 2013, and we develop a best-in-class performance management solution that enables exceptional results and puts employee experience at the heart of how companies align, motivate, and develop their people. And unlike the, kind of archaic, monolithic, and legacy HR technology that, many of us are familiar with, our lightweight and enterprise-ready SaaS solution that's used for check-ins, for feedback, for goals, for employee engagement and recognition are built to scale for businesses of all sizes. And we are backed with investments from the world-renowned Kleiner Perkins and Emergence Capital. And it really is an honor to be here with you today. So before we get into this statistic, I just want to get real for a second. I don't think it would be an understatement to say that the way we work has changed dramatically. It's true that companies and employees have always had an expectation to perform. I mean, that's what running a business is all about. But when the world went kind of topsy-turvy with the pandemic 2.5 years ago, we all had to literally overnight figure out how to keep our people engaged, how to keep them aligned, and how to keep our companies moving forward. And what we learned very quickly is that employees want to be valued for more than just the work that they do. They want to be seen as people first and foremost. And some recent Gartner research proves it, as you can see here. In their 2021, they call it the EVP benchmarking survey, and EVP stands for Employee Value Proposition. 82% of employees say it's important for their organization to see them as a person, not just an employee. But, and these numbers aren't on here, but in that survey, it also showed that only 45% of employees actually believe that their organization sees them this way. And even worse, only 23% of those employees actually expect to be working in their current organization, as the pandemic ends. So this, to me, really calls for an entirely new way of thinking and leading. And it's really why we believe that performance enablement is so critical. We consider performance enablement to really be the best approach to performance management. It's all about creating the infrastructure to support each team member as a whole person, and to support the performance potential of employees and help them develop and progress toward their career goals. And when these tools and resources, the infrastructure that I just mentioned, when this is in place, managers and their team members or their direct reports, they can co-develop, performance plans that move the individual, that move the team, and move the business forward. And it really is the engine that supports and drives engagement, productivity, and a more positive employee experience. So, I want to get into the 6 key areas that we recommend that you focus on to implement a modern performance enablement system in your company. And, I want to make no mistake with key number 1, realigning around performance enablement and making employees active participants in their own development is a very different way of thinking for many. And it really means a shift from, Ellen mentioned the traditional top-down goal management and one-way communication that is an adjustment for many managers. And it requires a commitment to real change. And, I don't want to pull any punches about successfully implementing a change like this. I mean, implementing a change like this, any kind of real systemic change requires a commitment to really a company-wide process, adoption of that process, and change management. And to make the process of performance management a success, it has to be a broad initiative, and it needs internal champions. It must have an executive sponsorship, and not just sponsorship, but support. HR definitely has a leading role to play in supporting and training and reinforcing the new process, but all organizational leaders have a vital role to play in this. And as an example, I was speaking with a senior leader in an organization last week who shared with me that they had just completed an executive planning session, and fully half of their 3-day agenda was specifically focused on people and culture. And all executives were actively engaged in this, not just HR, which is very good news for HR leaders. And above all, you also have to be willing to make the commitment to providing the proper tools and the training that will support you and ensure you and your business continue to evolve successfully. Now, at BetterWorks, a big part of what makes our customers successful is a focus on readiness and change management and adoption. And really, these are the pillars of a commitment to real change. And these 5 tips that you see here, they come from decades of success helping complex global enterprises improve their performance processes. And I wanted to share them with you all here. Tip number 1 is make sure you're engaging your stakeholders. Your stakeholders should be representatives across your business, and engage them early. Identify who your executive sponsor is and how they intend to support the change efforts and your change efforts. These stakeholders and sponsors, they are a key part of what we like to call your change network of champions as you're implementing your new program and your new tools. I'd also suggest that you tap into advocates of the change, of course, across your organization, high potential leaders, but also it's, I think, really important to tap into a few detractors in your organization who you can actually turn into advocates. One of the things that I heard last week that really resonated with me is that all change begins with something ending. And understanding what's ending for someone and empathizing with that person will help them become an advocate, get them on board sooner, and help you advocate for the change across your organization. So pulling even in some detractors to help you in your change network is key. Tip number 2 is, engaging with your stakeholders, and part of engaging with them includes interviewing them, actually talking with them, getting their feedback, asking them to help identify goals for the program. What does success look like to you? What does success look like to your stakeholders? And what does it look like for your sponsors? And think about that success at various stages of your program. We've all heard it, start with the end in mind, and it's really important that you identify what your success criteria is and how that looks for your organization. Tip number 3, as you think about priming your managers and your employees for change, you want to build out effective, customized, and ongoing program communications, as well as a really well-defined role-based training and training that incorporates some of the best practices related to performance enablement. We, through our years of experience, have thousands of templates that we've used with customers through the years, and really an effective communications campaign, and that's how you should think about it, ensures that you're setting appropriate expectations across the organization, clarity on policies, procedures, drives higher engagement, and bottom line, helps you ensure that there are no surprises, which makes all the difference in your efforts. Tip number 4, given that you started with the end in mind, and you quantified and qualified what success looks like, you'll be able to, you want to find ways to showcase your results as you really embed your program into your day-to-day processes and into, like Alan talked about, the flow of work. And this is when performance enablement really becomes real, when it's embedded into things like one-on-ones and check-ins, performance discussions, team meetings, quarterly business reviews that you might run as an organization, company all-hands meetings, incorporating into everything you do as part of your flow of work makes it real. And then the final tip is to use and leverage the data that is a part of the tool that you use to give you actionable insights into your employee engagement, their performance, your potential across the organization. The magic in the change really comes from the data. And by the way, this focus on readiness, on change management and adoption has resulted for us in a customer NPS score of +80, which is beyond world-class when it comes to our successful implementations. That is direct feedback from our customers. And even more impressive, over 90% gross customer retention. So to say that we take this seriously is kind of an understatement. All right, so let's get into the second key. And I spent so much time on the first because it is really important. But the second key to successfully implementing a performance enablement program is to set and be prepared to reset meaningful employee and business goals. And whether you call them goals or priorities or OKRs, it doesn't really matter. The importance is that they should never be a set and forget thing or be a set and forget exercise. And if there's anything that we know for sure, it's, and what we've seen in spades over the last couple of years, is that change is constant. And employees, enabling your employees to really perform at the highest level through an agile goal setting process that allows them to be aligned with larger team and company goals, and giving employees and managers the tools to have regular, meaningful check-ins or conversations about those goals ensures a more engaged, productive, and successful outcome for everyone. And it's through these regular check-ins that employees are able to adjust to changing business needs in a very agile way, and keeps them connected to the most important things and accountable for making them happen. And just to further the point, there's proof that this connection pays off. Amy mentioned at the start of the session that we have a report that we will share with everybody. And in this report, we found that 86% of senior leaders surveyed reported a 5% or greater increase in their employee satisfaction scores when employees felt aligned, when they felt that their work was aligned to strategic goals and initiatives. And companies who use a clear and accessible goal setting tool ensure that their employees see how their work directly impacts business results and provides for those critical feelings of purpose and mastery and autonomy, And I'll tell you, these tools really paid off for many of our customers in the thick of the pandemic, and continue to do so now, whether they continue in their operations as fully remote or hybrid, or maybe even fully back to office work environment. It's been, really quite amazing. All right, so let's move on to the third key to better performance enablement, and that is in providing real-time feedback. Feedback is all about information delivered as a result of someone's effort, and going back to an employee's need to really be thought of as a whole person. This really addresses the desire to learn and to feel accepted. And Jason Lauritsen, who is a management innovator and a good friend of BetterWorks, I think he said it best, and his quote is here: "One of the most fundamental failures of the performance review process is that it orients us towards only providing feedback, review, critique, or coaching once a year. And the reality is performance happens every single day. It happens every single hour. So we should be having much more frequent conversations." And, feedback is a gift. It's really the foundation to a better employee experience. And study after study has shown that to be effective, employees want and need regular feedback, not just once a year during a traditional review process. And, you don't want to deliver too much feedback because that can overwhelm an employee, but having the right tools and the right structure to help managers find the right balance to give the most useful and actionable feedback really can get you started off on the right foot. Productive and effective feedback should come from a place of trust. It should be empathetic and free from judgment and bias. It should be constructive and really focused on behaviors that a person can change, things that are concrete and specific. Like I said earlier, it should be given in real time, or at the very least, very, very timely. It should not be focused on, some distant past event. And should be motivational and really learning oriented, focusing on fundamentals so that outcomes are improved. And bottom line, managers should be showing employees that they care not only about productivity, but about an employee's well-being, their professional development, and providing employees with the opportunity to talk about their needs and their growth and development and career goals. All right, so the fourth key to better performance enablement is to motivate employees to do outstanding work by providing relevant development opportunities with an eye towards career pathing and employee growth and productivity. In fact, according to Gartner, in the next 2 years, 40% of organizations will deploy a continuous learning technology to better support organizational shifts towards real-time performance, feedback, and coaching. Add to that, a constantly changing work and market and technology and world landscape. These are all things that contribute to the changing needs of employers and employees. And the World Economic Forum even went so far as to say that 50% of employees will need to be retrained or reskilled by 2025. And this was a report just from last year. So this is not very far off and requires that all of us focus on improving internal development capabilities so that we can stay more competitive and succeed in today's market by investing in our most important asset, and that is our people. And ensuring that our talent needs are aligned to our business needs. when we work together, employees alongside their manager are able to identify the skills that they need and align their learning goals with the business needs, as well as employees' long-term goals. And that is really key in helping them grow and develop and our businesses thrive. Okay, so the fifth key to better performance enablement is recognizing employee achievements. Employee recognition is a crucial component to the employee experience, and recognizing your employees for the work that they put in and their accomplishments results in increased employee engagement and job satisfaction, and they're more likely to work harder and become more invested in their work when they feel appreciated for what they do. When team members complete tasks that drive the business forward or expand their abilities, it's really important to have systems in place that see and acknowledge and record those milestones. And a good performance enablement process will have an active framework for giving and receiving positive recognition and reinforcement. And, just to give you an example here, I included a couple of real feedback and recognition that some of the BetterWorks employees have left on our own recognition wall. And, we use our product internally. We call our product our instant champagne. We drink our own champagne. We use our recognition module. We have it integrated with Slack. We have a recognition Slack channel, and employees can recognize, other employees at any time. I did change the names here to protect the recognized, but it's such a great way to publicly acknowledge, departmental or cross-functional partners across the organization. We also did this really cool thing. We created these emojis that align with our company values, which you see on the bottom here: stretch, don't settle, prioritize people, be a CEO, and do the right thing. And, recognizing employees for values, it is a way to bring your culture to life and, really walk the talk of what is most near and dear to you and your company. And, I love this quote from one of our customers, Helen Sedcole, who's the Chief People Officer at Z Energy in New Zealand. And she said that the recognition component of BetterWorks has enabled democratized feedback. And so people are getting really nice feedback from their peers and from people all around the organization. It goes to the individual, it goes to their line manager. So there's more collective support of our people doing great work. And, I got to say, hearing feedback, ourselves and how we're helping other organizations is really why we love what we do here at BetterWorks. All right, so we have come to the sixth and final key to performance enablement, and that is about making employees more active participants in the process. Performance enablement at its core is about giving employees the tools that they need to be active and not passive participants in their own development and success. It means creating an environment where they have a voice in the process. They can openly share their thoughts, their opinions, their ideas, their innovations. And we have seen really two ways that are most impactful to get employees more active in their performance engagement. First of all is, giving employees a say in setting their goals. When the goal setting process is collaborative, employees genuinely become more connected and engaged. And since they're closest to their work, they can think strategically about how their role can align with and really drive company goals and company results. And second is offering employees the opportunity to give upward feedback to their managers. This helps employees feel heard. It helps build trust, provides managers with really valuable insight to become better leaders, and also helps HR, really collect good, objective feedback to develop managers and future leaders across their organization. So, in summary, these 6 key things allow for a modern performance enablement system. They are committing to real change, setting and being agile enough to allow for the resetting of goals. Number 3, the ability to provide real-time feedback. 4th, supporting robust growth and development opportunities. And 6th, making all employees at all levels more active participants in the process. And with that, I thank all of you for your time. I hope that this message has been meaningful. I hope it has allowed you to take some good ideas back to your own organizations to drive great performance enablement. And hopefully we have a few minutes left for questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Just trying to reshare my camera because my mouse is playing up. It should be coming on in a second. We actually are a bit short on time for questions, so we will incorporate any of them into the panel when we get to that shortly. So I want to make sure
the demo, maybe, probably both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure why my video is. Can you see my video?
Yeah.
Andrea? Oh, perfect. So we're now getting, and thank you for that session. We had, again, a lot of chat going on in the chat, which is really great to see. So have a read of that when you have a moment, and we'll try and address some of those comments in shortly. There was definitely a lot of good points and comments and questions. So we'll ask you to stick around as we now have the panel. As a reminder, continue to submit your questions, which you're obviously doing anyway, which is great to see. So I'd like to welcome back Alan. I'd also like to introduce you to Isabel de Wolf, Director of Talent and Organizational Development at Barco. So welcome, Isabel. If you could share your video with us, there you are. Could you give yourself, introduce yourself and give a bit of background? That would be great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Alan and Andrea, for the very interesting interventions. My name is Isabel. I work at Barco. Barco is headquartered in Belgium, Europe. We are a visualization, or we offer visualization solutions in different markets, such as large video walls in control rooms. Perhaps somebody knows the ClickShare that we use in meeting rooms to share content. In healthcare, we offer visualization solutions for diagnostic imaging, operating rooms, and we are in the entertainment business as well with the cinema projectors and immersive experience. So many different domains we are active in. A lot of R&D engineers working at Barco, operations, sales, etc. Now, what is my role in Barco? I am the Global HR Director, Talent and Organizational Development. 2 big domains I'm responsible for: talent acquisition, internal mobility, learning and development, so the Barco University. Next to that, I'm responsible for leadership development, performance enablement, talent management, succession planning, and a bit more tactical or strategical, the strategical workforce planning, headcount forecasting, etc. So 2 very large or big domains within HR, but for me, both go hand in hand, looking at the individual on one hand, looking into the organization and how we can enable both go for me hand in hand. So it's really great to be here. And there are already a lot of things I saw in the chats which I would like to comment on, but I will wait further the panel and the discussion or the questions that come up.
Great, thank you, Isabel. Well, we'll start with you actually. Since you've seen so many interesting comments in the chat, Andrea just shared her 6 key steps that organizations can take to transition from traditional performance management to performance enablement, focusing on goals, conversations, feedback recognition. What elements have you seen work best in performance enablement programs, either in your organization or outside of your organization, and how has it worked?
Yeah. So we transitioned, or we started the transitioning from performance, or very traditional performance management, to performance enablement about 4 years ago. And I will not go into what we offered as tools or structure or the training on skills and how to give feedback, etc. But what I would like to highlight are two things. Is one, what Andrea talked about, is the change management. I think it's a lot about change management. So we started and taking the time to explain the why, not only to leadership, because you definitely need the buy-in of all your stakeholders, executive leadership, but your employees as well. So explaining the why, the what's in it for me, what will improve in my work, in my professional life when we transition to performance enablement, was key in our change process. So that is already one thing I would like to highlight. And the second thing I would like to highlight is something I saw in the chat as well, and is something that is really important to us as well. You can have the best tools, you can have the best training in how to do a feedback conversation, how to include frequent feedback in the flow of work, but you really need the right mindset, the right culture, not only in your employees, having a growth mindset, being open to receive feedback and to dare to ask feedback as well, but in your leadership as well. So if you have a more coaching leadership, if you have participative leadership, or leaders that are open to receive feedback or to give feedback, to learn from it, then you will be able to transform towards a performance enablement culture. So if you don't have that, you can have the best tools, the best structure, the best training in what is feedback and what are feedback models that we can use, but then you will kill your feedback enablement or your performance enablement. So you really need that growth mindset, not only in your employees, but in your leaders and your leadership as well.
Great, thank you, Isabel. Alan, do you have anything to add to that? What have you seen work well in your career?
Okay, just to reinforce the point about change management that Isabel made. I think the advantage that I had in a previous employer where I led this work, I think we had the advantage of being able to spend almost upwards of a year kind of socializing the organization, socializing the leadership team, kind of getting them exposed to these new ideas, getting them to confront their assumptions about what motivates people, because it takes a little bit of time to get them comfortable with these ideas. So it took a lot of time with change management, explaining what we were running toward, not what we were running away from. And my experience with kind of performance management is they love the new stuff. I love the flexibility, the OKRs, more feedback, more touch points, more check-ins. All that sounds great. Once you start talking to them about abandoning ratings, abandoning more individualistic paper for performance programs, their claws dig in, and you drag them kicking and screaming away from it. So the more time you can spend on the things that they're going to really have trouble with, that really require different thinking, the better, for sure. That's a key one. And to reinforce the point that Andrea made, in the research that we did, the most important differentiator of what people perceive as effective systems from ineffective systems was leadership sponsorship. They're using it. They're drinking the Kool-Aid. They're eating the same meal that you're eating, and they are modeling it. It was the most important factor for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think that will help. Some of the questions in the chat were around how you can really go about convincing leadership team that this is something that they should consider. So hopefully that gives some practical tips around that.
Well, even just one last point on Isabel's point about if you have leaders that have a bit of an experimental mindset, they're willing to try things, then because people are terrified that if we move to focus more on organizational incentive programs like profit sharing, gain sharing, and so on, that people are going to quit working, that they're literally going to stop working because their individual performance is disconnected from their individual outcomes are disconnected from their individual efforts. And I think if they were to experiment a little bit, they would see that that's not the case, that people do continue to show up every day in environments where you don't have those programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And there was a question here. There's a lot of conversation in the chat around it seems like we're telling managers to take on more and do more. So how can we better equip managers to help employees? Is this a situation where they're going to have to be spending much more time if we're enabling them? Andrea, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Isabel was saying in the context of this question too. Enabling employees starts with connecting with them, and the connection that you enable between managers and employees, managers of all levels and employees, drives better engagement. It's not micromanagement. It helps people feel better that they are not being micromanaged, because it is an active participation between two people as opposed to a tops down management of stuff that has to be done, right? There is stuff that has to be done, but the way you think about getting that stuff done is conversational, it's regular, it's inclusive of what matters to me, what matters to you as the person that I'm engaging with. And, going back to the growth mindset, the thing that is great about a growth mindset is it's not like you have it or you don't, right? You can nurture people into a growth mindset. Now, some people might be more naturally inclined towards a growth mindset, but you can nurture people through regular connection, regular conversations into a growth mindset, or more of a growth mindset than maybe what, they originally had. And I think it's that connection and the transparency that comes from the regular connection that, enables the performance that you want to see in the organization.
Can I add something to that? Amy, you mentioned it's asking managers or leaders to do more. I'm not convinced of that. It's not always about asking them to do more, for instance, more conversations. It's sometimes about doing it differently than what they were used to do, how they were used to do it. So less directive and more in a coaching and an open conversation, asking input from their team. So it's not about doing more. It's about doing it differently.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there was a lot of chat about that, so I wanted to make sure that we touched upon it. A lot of comments around how we have different generations in the workforce of managers. So how can we really shift that mindset? Isabel, do you have any kind of practical tips around how you've aligned managers on this in your organization?
Spending a lot of time with them, not only by HR, but by peers. And we do feel that it's peer coaching and learning from each other in giving feedback or in changing your mindset or in accepting that there are no mistakes, there's only feedback, but taking a lot of time, a lot of putting people together, connecting people. Whether it was pre-COVID or during COVID, we always tried to connect people, whether it was virtually or live, and making the time and the place to discuss and to show sometimes that it's not always so easy to do it. And following the change and the learning curve of each individual. I think that is very important. And I think it was in the chat as well, is trying, and I know it's very abstract, it's trying to create a safe environment and psychological safety, even for leaders to learn and to say, now I have to question my own leadership style. I have done this my entire life differently, and now I have to change. And it's creating enough safety and trust to learn, to change, to try, to sometimes make mistakes, but to try over again. So
Great.
a lot of different things that we did, and perhaps too much to share here, because I think we will exceed the time that we have. But a lot of small things and taking the time to do so. It's not one little project that you launch and then you go to the next project. It's something that takes time, and that asks for your investment, not only as HR, of course, but of everybody.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you, Isabel. Last question for everybody before we get to the demo. What's one last piece of advice you can give to a HR leader and team that recognizes that their current process aren't working and is looking to transform the way their businesses think of performance management? So Alan, perhaps we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo kind of what I said earlier about run towards something, don't run away from something. So be thoughtful about what you're running toward and what this is a part of, and take the time to kind of reflect with people up front. Don't dive into action, dive into thinking about what our assumptions and beliefs are and what we want this process to do for us, and to really question what this process is doing for us now. And so I think that's really the key piece is to think before you act, and don't just trust your consultants. Don't just trust and don't be prisoner. I mean, I look at BetterWorks. Don't be a prisoner to your large human capital system, because a lot of what people are using are being driven by is the handcuffs that they are in with their large human capital application, and refuse to be a prisoner to them. Find ways around them, find ways of adding technology on top that's better, because it is very much handcuffing most of us. So don't give up just because you have one.
Yeah. Thank you. Andrea, what advice would you give? You've just given loads of tips, so
I've been for a long time here. I think I would summarize it into two things. Number one, really understand what the downstream consequences or negative consequences are for not making a change in your organization, and really being able to quantify them, because that also helps you understand what success looks like on the other side. And the second thing is, make sure you are partnering with an organization that really understands and can guide you through the massive change that this is within an organization. If you don't have somebody sitting there at the table with you, arm in arm, helping you really clarify how you're going to drive transformation with the leadership team that you have in your organization, and how that partner is going to be in lockstep with you driving that change, you want to make sure you have that very strong partnership. Underselling the massive amount of change that this is, and understanding what it takes to make it happen, I think is really important.
Great advice. And Isabel, we'll finish with you.
Yes, very short. I think check the culture of your organization and the maturity level of your organization. Where are you today? Where would you like to? What would you like to achieve? And take some small steps. Sometimes you need to force and change the culture, but there's no one size fits all. I think you need to look into what kind of organization are we? Do we want to be or become? And how mature are we to change? And then start with what is there. Start, for instance, with your leadership or with your mindset, or creating a safe environment before going full blown with everything. So take small steps, but take it from the heart of your organization and what is the need of your organization and the people in your organization.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. I think we could keep going for another hour, especially with all of the questions that were in the chat. As I said, I've never seen so many questions, so we love to see it. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Alan, for joining this panel discussion. It seems like everybody took a lot out of this conversation, so really appreciate your contributions. And that means, Bruce, I've given you a whole 5 minutes, which is unheard of.
This is incredible.
I'm obviously starting to nail my duties as a moderator. So we'll move over to you. Before I pass over to Bruce, we obviously would love to hear from you. If anyone gets excited, as I'm sure you will, from Bruce's demo, feel free to get in touch. We're happy to spend much more time with you, showing you the system. So I hope everyone picked up some practical tips. And talking about practical tips, Bruce is now going to show you how to put some of these concepts into action. So Bruce, I won't talk anymore and I'll pass over to you. So if everyone else can come off video and we can give Bruce the stage.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So 5 minutes is great. It's still not as long as I'd love to chat through some of the things that were brought up in the questions in the chat. They're really interesting things. Love to show you more around how BetterWorks can support you on changing people's view on bias, on how we can use templated questions to really focus on what's important for managers. So I'm just going to pick on 3 quick areas to jump into to show you. First one that is really powerful is bringing the whole conversation, feedback, and goal activities into everybody's everyday activities. So what I have here is Outlook. We have BetterWorks plugins that go directly into Outlook, into Gmail, into Microsoft Teams, into Slack, as Andrea's already mentioned, which really make sure that people are constantly reminded and thinking about what's important to them. Michelle, who I'm logged in as here, has access to see what's going well on the objectives that she's focused on. She can go in and update those objectives while she's working away here, making sure that she's keeping everything up to date very quickly and easily, commenting on them, transparently posting information about her own progress within the tool here. But on top of that, it's also contextualized. So for example, if Michelle clicks on an email to Robin, it will change over and show information about Robin, allowing Michelle, after she's met with Robin, to immediately request or give feedback. So potentially following on from a discussion, she can within Outlook itself give thanks or recognize a coaching opportunity through the feedback aspect here, really making sure that people don't have to go somewhere else to carry out their activities. They can do it within their standard tools, keeping it all in the flow of their work very, very quickly and easily to do. So this is a real game changer, we find, for organizations. No longer are you having to chase around to get feedback and to see your performance activities. They're all spelt out for you whenever you go into Outlook and alongside your normal work. I'm going to move across now into the main BetterWorks tool. There were some questions that were raised around the needs to get some information about how things are going with the performance transformation you're making. And what we do within BetterWorks is we give a lot of insights. One of the tools we have is this area here that you can pass out to your managers, as well as having it for the HR teams to see, which spells out to them how they're doing against whatever metrics you set. So in these examples here, I've got metrics around how many objectives I expect employees to have, how often I'm expecting feedback to be put in place, effective communication that's occurring. These are all configurable, so you can make sure that the appropriate targets are set for the appropriate groups, and if you don't want to use them, you can switch any of them off as well. So it's very easy to use, but it gives a manager a real insight into how things are going within their own team. They can drill through to look at it at an individual level rather than at a team basis. So managers now, rather than HR having to be the police force tracking the performance enablement program, managers take on some of that responsibility and start to shape and see what good looks like and pass that on to their individual teams. And the third area I'm just going to quickly go into on the objectives themselves is around the way that you can align behind the objectives of a company and the strategy that the company holds. I do this in quite a visual way. So my company here has some key strategies that everybody is aligned behind. What I like the tool will show is making people understand how their work contributes. So if I continue down this chain here, I can see that Jerry, one of the employees, is working away on quite a small aspect of a project for him. He may not understand why that's important, but suddenly, with the visual view that he gets within BetterWorks, he understands how he's impacting Michelle, his manager's work, which is impacting the CIO's work, which is impacting all the way up to the strategy. Doesn't have to follow that hierarchical line. It can be going up and down the hierarchy very, very quickly and easily, but it gives that simple to understand visual alongside simple to understand color coding to help people to see how things are going throughout the business. So just 3 quick areas there to show you how things can work within BetterWorks. I can spend hours, and we'd love to spend some time with some of you talking through the tool and helping you to understand how we can help you transform your business.
Wow, you stayed on time, Bruce. That was very impressive. Thank you all so much to everyone. I know you'll all likely have meetings to run to. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you for all the interactivity in the chat. That was amazing to see, as well as our panelists' contributions. Again, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to demo our solution to you more. So please feel free to get in touch. You can find me on
Ladies and gentlemen, we have concluded the webinar. Unfortunately, it seems like we lost Amy at the very end, but I just like to echo her last message. Thank you so much for all of you being here with us. And Bruce, it was a fantastic, really, really quick pitch, quick demo. I'm sure people want to learn more about the product itself. So look out for betterworks.com or look for Bruce on LinkedIn, Amy on LinkedIn. I'm sure that they will be more than happy to show you the product and an opportunity more sort of in-depth. Thank you so much for all of you being here with us. And until next time, I wish you a great evening, a great morning, and a great rest of the day. See you next time. Thank you and goodbye.